Part 3.
Now that we've got our assets prepared and collected, we can start having fun by actually creating the brush. So I'm going to go with 1920 by 1080 at 72 DPI. And I want to start off by making a black background because fire just looks better with a contrasting black background. So let me click on colors here and make sure that we've got the black brought forward. So I just click this button to make a new pixel layer, which you probably figured out. And now I'm going to paint bucket and drop that black color in by clicking it. And I'm going to lock this layer, but I think that just means I can't move stuff around on it, but I definitely can paint on things that are locked. I don't know if this is my lack of knowledge of the program or some kind of bug, but we see this layer is locked. And if I go to my paintbrush, let's get a color that we can see. And I actually started to make a brush already, but you can paint on a locked layer, which I don't know why, but let's just make sure we don't select that layer when we do our painting. And let's also open up our brushes. And I'm actually going to click and drag this tab out here just so I could get a better view of it. And I have the option to, if you haven't already, you could create a new category. And if you don't like brushes, number, or whatever, you can go to rename category and call this one fire or whatever you want. And yeah, so let me just, before I do too much, let me just click on one of these default brushes, and then I'll go back to click this little drop down to get your latest category. Will always be at the bottom of the list as far as I know. So now we just got a regular brush. Okay, good. And so we're definitely starting from scratch here. And to create a new brush, we click this little, I think it's a hamburger menu. It's so small, it's hard to see. But we click on that. We go to new image brush. And I'm going to start off by selecting my Smoke 01. And I'm going to double click on it because it looks like it's a really small size to start out with. So I'm going to make this, that's maybe too big. That looks like a decent size here for a default. And okay, so and we're painting on the correct layer. So now we've just got this brush here, which is let's undo that. So I accidentally deleted that background layer, but not a problem. I just got to make sure I select this layer, press Command A, press Command X. I'm going to keep this selected on this layer, so I could just press Control X if you're on the PC and just paint something, Control X, just to clean the slate there. And yeah, I wish this lock really locked stuff. But the next step is to go to Texture, and we got brush nozzles here, and I could just click Add and find number 2. And now you can see we got, instead of just the same brush, we got the brush and the flipped version of the brush. And if I go to general, turn up spacing, you can see that you're getting the flipped version and you're getting the regular version. I don't know how it decides the intervals or if we can even change it. It's set to random, so I guess it's going to randomly choose between this nozzle and this one. And yeah, so that helps to get a little bit of variety. The next thing to help to get variety is adjust the size jitter. And I'm not using a tablet for this one, so pressure isn't going to do me any good. I'm going to set this to random. And let's Control X to clear that out and start painting. That's random, but maybe it's a little too random. Now let's try this. Control X to get rid of everything. All right, so I think that's good. I can go to the spacing and bring that down a little bit, and I can go to dynamics and adjust the accumulation, the flow jitter. I could rotate it. If I go too far, it might look a little bit weird because we set transparency towards the bottom. So I'm going to keep the rotation just kind of to a minimum. And it's really, the smoke is kind of a background thing, so I don't want to get too caught up on it. But I could adjust maybe the scatter a little bit. Now for the scatter, it helps. It pushes things up and down, left or right, and but if I go too far with it, we're going to kind of lose our path and things are going to shoot up and down, and I'm not going to have any control. And yeah, so we can also try a little bit of luminosity jitter. Now I could bring this all the way up and I'm going to get white clouds, which I don't want. So what I'm going to do is click on my little slider here and just see, okay, so I want to keep it down, this one down, and I'm going to bring this one to the middle. So now my luminosity is only going to go between 100% color and black. So that's going to give me a little bit better smoke. I'm okay if the smoke gets blacker. I just don't want it to ever get a lighter color. And yeah, so I'll come back to this later, but for now, I think it's time to move on to the fire. And we do this by creating a sub brush. So the sub brush is a really powerful tool. It's basically a brush on top of another brush. And let's bring this up here. And we have to add bitmap. So I click this button here. I'm going to click Fire 1. And you can see, okay, we've got a brush, but what can we do with it? And the answer is everything. So if I double click on it, this is not just like a gimmick thing. If I double click on it, you see I get this sub brush editor window. And I have almost all the same settings, the general, the dynamic. So it's basically a brush on top of a brush with all the possibilities. And it has blend modes, so we could blend it. And I'm getting a little excited, but this is really a cool thing. And one thing that I like is you can see that the spacing is turned off. But if I turn off sync spacing, I'm going to leave sync size, because when I change the size of one, I want them all to change. But I'm going to turn sync spacing off. And then you can see it's still grayed out here. But if I close this window and then double click on this sub brush again, you'll see now. And I like to move this away because it puts it right on top of the original and it looks similar. So it's easy to get confused if you don't move it away. So I'll move it down a little bit to the side. Actually, let's just keep it over here and I'll close this when I'm done, because otherwise I can't see what I'm doing. So now I can adjust the spacing for this. And you can see it's adjusting the spacing separate from the smoke. And that's a really nice feature. So I'm going to go into dynamics. I'm going to go with a size jitter and set that to random. And let's Control X to clear this out here. So you can see it's already, with not much effort, we're getting something that's halfway decent. And now if we go through here, we can let's adjust some other things here. We could adjust well, we have this texture here also, so let's add in our flipped version. So Fire 2, it's set to random, and all right, and then some of the smoke is covering up. Let's see what we can do with if we go to general blend mode, and let's set this to let's just go to add, see how that works. And the next thing I'm going to do is, you know what, maybe I'm going to reduce the spacing just so we have more. And yeah, so we have more. I think we've done about as much as we can. We could adjust the rotation a little bit. And again, I don't want it to go completely sideways because it's just going to look weird. So I just keep a little bit of rotation there. And I could adjust maybe the hue. Now, I don't want rainbow fire, so I'm going to do this maybe 1 or 2%. And not much more than that for this hue, saturation, luminosity, jitter, and just to make sure we didn't do anything weird. Okay, so I think that's all right. And then I basically, I can close this out, and I can add another sub brush in here by clicking add bitmap, and I'll go with number 3, hit open, and uncheck the sync spacing, and then double click on it and increase the spacing. Also go into texture. Let's get that other version of this one in there, and go to dynamics, turn on the size jitter, set that to random, and we're starting to get a little bit more of a random look. Now, one thing that's important is if I go here and I'm going to close this window. If I go here, back into our main brushes settings, we have set this to at current nozzle, or we could say at end of stroke. So if I set this at end of stroke, when I start painting, I won't see the effects of that new brush until I let go, and then you can see it adds it after the stroke. So this is nice because it lets you see the difference that you made from when I just had this one as opposed to when I added this one to it. So otherwise it's hard to tell if you really did much, but now I could paint it and then let go, and I could see how it's adding on. And I want to double click on this one and get to its sub brush settings, and I'm going to change this blend mode. Let's set this to add also, and I'll see the result that we get. So it's subtle if it's really even doing much at all, but if you really want to know, is this making a difference, then click on difference and paint that in here. And you can see, yeah, actually the blend mode is affecting how it interacts with the other strokes. And you could try like hard light, and you could just like paint one stroke and see how that compares with something like add. And you just pick the blend mode that you like. And I kind of like that hard light. I'm going to stick with that. That just gives a little bit extra punch and contrast in there, whereas the add kind of just makes things closer to white. So let's keep going. Let's close this one out here, and I'll add a bitmap. We've got this fire. Let's open that up, double click on it, go to its texture, add the reverse. And you don't even have to do this. I could add these reverses as whole other sub brushes, and that would give me even more control, but I'm just doing it this way because it's a little bit faster, and you can see it's just right off the bat, it just gives you variety without doing too much legwork. And also I forgot to turn off sync spacing. So I just close that window and double click on the sub brush again to get back to sub brush settings. Set the spacing how you like it. Go to dynamics, do a size jitter, set that to random. And we also forgot at current nozzle. Let's say at end of stroke. And we know that this one is good, so we'll turn this, instead of previewing it after we draw, we'll preview it at current stroke. So now this one's at current nozzle, and this one will only show up after we draw it, so we could tell what impact it's making. And and it's making pretty nice impact. So double click on here and look at its settings, see if there's any things we want to do here, like just bump up the jitter a tiny bit on these, tiny bit on the rotation, or you could go bananas and see how sideways looking fireworks, and I don't really like that. And yeah, so it's basically like that, and going through the different blend modes. Let's for the heck of it, let's see how this fire works with multiply, and that's not too bad. I kind of like this one better than this one here. There's not much variety. We could look at overlay, see how that works, or if you want to get just weird stuff, we looked at difference or exclusion. If you want to get like magical, weird looking fire, it's just a matter of finding the right blend mode. What did we do the first one? Hard light. Let's see if that works again. So that's basically it. I would definitely do a lot more. I probably would use more fire brushes and more images to get more variety. But that is pretty much all the settings, and then you just go through them, start tweaking things, maybe see if adjusting the flow and accumulation probably a little bit, maybe even add a little bit of scatter to some of these. And yeah, so you can really go wild with this effect. And I don't need to see this last sub brush after the fact anymore. If I know it's good, I want to see it as I'm drawing it. So I'll say at current nozzle, and you've got your fire. Actually, this brush is too big to write with, so let's make it a little bit smaller. Control Alt, hold down right click, hold down left click, and let's just see how this looks. Okay, so I'm not good at guessing sizes of letters, but you could see if I looked at this really closely, I can see, okay, there's parts that are getting repetitive, like this peak here, and you know, if I had maybe, instead of just 3 brushes that are flipped, if I had like 6 brushes and I spaced them out a lot more, we would see a lot less of that repetition. But even with that, this is a pretty decent brush and a pretty impressive engine for creating custom brushes. Affinity Photo, and I think Affinity Designer, if you go into the pixel persona, has the same brush setting. So very nice stuff, very cool. And I don't know, I don't think Photoshop, I don't think Corel Painter, I don't think I don't really think any other programs have this type of control for creating custom brushes.